So one of the questions that I get the most when I'm working with people who are learning how to letter is, how do I use a brush marker? Initially, what you'll want to do is practice some basic strokes and then move on to letters and phrases. When we're working with our brush markers, if you did receive the upgraded brush marker in your kit, you will have a brush marker. It will either be the Tombow, which comes in a wide range of colors, lots and lots of colors. This one is the black one. This is also the Zig Brushable, which is another brush marker that I really like. The benefit of this one is that it actually has two sides that are the brush tip, whereas your Tombow, which is a little bit larger and inkier, has the brush tip on one side and a doodling tip on the other. So one thing that we'll want to do when we're getting started with our brush markers, in our journal on page 8, you'll see a basic strokes page, and then this articulates a lot of the basic strokes that you would need to use for your brush marker practice before you get to letters. Any of the practice in the journal can be done with your brush marker as opposed to your super tip. The super tip is a little bit easier to use and functions somewhat like a brush marker, but the brush marker has some unique characteristics. One of the biggest mistakes that people use when they're starting to use their brush marker, you can kind of see the tip is really wide. We actually want to use the width of the tip, so our hand is going to be at a 90-degree angle from here. And instead of dragging down from the tip, we're actually going to drag down from the side. So if I drag down from the tip of the pen, I can only ever get that line to be that. Let me move this over so you can see a little bit better, that skinny. But if I'm dragging down from the side, I can get really, really thick lines. So that's what we're going for. This is called the downstroke. So anywhere the stroke of my letter is moving in a downward motion, it's going to be nice and thick. So an example of that, this is thin, that's thick, and that's thin again. So any of the places, this is the thin upstroke, this is the thick downstroke. I was moving in a thin upward motion. Right about here, I started moving into that thick downward motion, and right here is where I was moving up in a thinward direction. So what we're gonna do for those thin upstrokes is start at the baseline and just drag up with the very tippy top surface of our brush tip. So it's basically like a wispy line. I'm just kind of kissing the surface of the tracing paper. This is a little thick. Okay, that last one would probably be quite thick. The next one is a thin upstroke, thick to thin. Thin to thick to thin. So it goes up and then down and then up again. So we have light, dark, and light again. Or we have light, dark, light, dark, light, dark in a series. Okay. The next one is an upside down U, and that just kind of helps us practice that dark to light. We can also practice the J and the S. The O is a relatively easy letter to practice. We start at the center top and then close out with a thinner line. You can also close out with a loop. One tip with the O is that we want to make sure that we start releasing into that thin line just before we get to 50% of the way around. And then we have, oops, try that again. Sometimes the tracing paper gets stuck. We have the line that would eventually become the base of something like a K or an H, and then we have an L.